All right, we are going to get started. So today we have Jared Little here from Wings Financial Credit Union, and he is going to be talking to us about the top 10 financial tips for teens. If you have questions or your advisory has questions throughout the presentation, you can email Mr. Sleeper, Luke Sleeper. All right, Jared.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Oh, that was a little better. I'll take that. Friends, once again, good morning. My name is Jared Little. I am an education specialist with Wings Financial Credit Union. Who in here has heard of Wing Financial? Anybody? If you ever drive on Cedar Avenue through Apple Valley, you going north, it's the tallest, most commanding structure in Apple Valley. Pretty cool. Anybody know what a credit union is? Raise your hand if you do. Maybe you've heard of it. Hopefully I can clarify that in this presentation today. Awesome. Those of you just coming in, welcome. I'm Jared Little, education specialist. My full-time job is to go to schools around the Twin Cities and even in greater Minnesota and give presentations to people about money management. And it's a pretty awesome job. I'm going to go ahead and keep going because this is going to go quick today, and I want to make sure I get through the content today because this is for you. At any point during the presentation, please feel free, raise your hand, ask any questions. Again, I want this to be useful to you. In a very short amount of time, you will be managing your own money. Maybe some of you already are. What I'm going to do today is we're going to go through top 10 financial tips for teens. That's a lot of T's there. Some of this stuff you might have heard of. Some of this stuff you might not have heard of. Question for the group. How many of you have taken a class in personal finance? Anybody? That's great for those of you that have. A lot of people learn financial education from their parents. Not every school in Minnesota actually teaches this content. Some of us had to learn this stuff through the School of Hard Knocks, if you will, throughout our lives. So, going forward, before we get into the top 10 tips for you, my question to the group: what does it mean to be good with money? Who has an answer to that question?
Budgeting.
Very good. Budgeting. What's another answer to this question? I bet we all have different answers. Yes? Knowing how to save. What else? Let me ask you a follow-up. Does being good with money mean you have a lot of money? No. I have a friend who makes $250,000 a year, and he lives paycheck to paycheck. That's a true story. I also have a friend that makes about $30,000 a year and manages to save about $6,000 a year. Being good with money doesn't mean you make a lot, doesn't mean you have a lot. Being good with money means a lot of things depending on who you ask. But there are some sort of conventional wisdoms about money management that have always been true, some of which we'll go through today. But I have a saying when it comes to finance. When it comes to managing money, it's 10% math, 90% psychology. And the decisions, the financial decisions that you make, a lot of them are going to come from emotion. And a lot of them are not going to be always the best decisions. It's okay to not always make the best decisions. It's okay to make mistakes. I included this graphic here because I think this is a good one. Raise your hand if you heard the term wellness before. Wellness. That is a word used a lot today. Some of you may take health class. You learn about wellness. When I was in high school, we learned about physical wellness. We didn't talk a lot about mental wellness. Mental health is in the news all the time. There's an awareness that keeping an eye on your brain, being aware of your mental health, is just as important as your physical health, or your social health, or your spiritual health. All of these things are important. Your financial health is one of those things. And if any one of these areas is compromised, it can put stress on the others. And financial stress causes people a lot of mental stress, a lot of social stress, a lot of spiritual stress, a lot of everything. It is the knowledge that you gain when it comes to managing money that will help you keep track of this area of wellness. And it's a road, it's a journey, not a destination. If you all go to college, some of you will, maybe some of you won't, you're not going to be rich right outside the door. Most of you. It's a long road to that, if you achieve it at all. But you will handle millions of dollars in your life. It doesn't sound like it, but you will. The choices that you make with it will determine your financial wellness. So, without further ado, let's jump into some tips on how to do that. Wants and needs. Raise your hand if you've heard these terms before. You learned about this in kindergarten. What is a want and what is a need? However, as an adult, it's still important to understand this difference. Plenty of adults that I know and work with, and even myself, sometimes struggle with what a want is and what a need is. The important thing that everybody needs to understand, and I know that you all should understand because you learned it in kindergarten, is that you need to pay for your needs before your wants. Make sure you can make your rent. Make sure you can pay for your heating and your water bill before you go buy that pair of yoga pants, or that Under Armour shirt, or that new flashy car. It is okay to have wants. I'm not going to stand up in front of you and say, you should save everything and only pay for what you need. No. It's okay to have wants. Who in here has a want? Something that you want, that you wish you had money for? Anybody want to share something that they want? What do you want, my friend? A car! Cars are expensive, aren't they? Not exactly a need, but living in the suburbs without a car is pretty hard, right? And someday you will get one. What's another want somebody has? I bet they're all different in here. It's funny, when I ask that question to second graders, they say, I want a puppy. I want a stuffy. You guys' wants are obviously very different. And your wants will change over time. Sometimes a perceived need can actually be a want. You want that athletic shirt, but do you have to have an Under Armour shirt? Does it have to be Adidas? You want that pair of yoga pants, does it have to be Lululemon? Right? Sometimes it can be muddled. We need clothes. Do we need designer clothes? We need a car. Do we need to buy a Maserati? Probably not. Really think about needs and wants before you make a purchase. Even if it's only for a few seconds. It's important to understand what is a need and what is a want. Utilize the tools of your financial institution. How many of you have a bank account? That is awesome. Not everybody does. I have a famous story about an old friend of mine named Jamie. Jamie didn't believe in banks. He didn't believe in the system, he always said. He kept his money under his mattress at his house. He would cash every paycheck and put it under his mattress. Worse, he told people that he did this. Who wants to guess what happened to Jamie? Jamie got robbed. He lost all of his money. If he had put his money in an account at a financial institution, he would have been fine. Now, I use the term financial institution because credit unions and banks do the exact same thing. I work at a credit union. I have always liked credit unions. They are not-for-profit financial institutions. They usually offer the same products, accounts, loans, financial advice, a number of different things, but their interest rates are lower for things like cars and mortgages. And usually their savings rates are higher. But I'm not here to bash banks. If you have a bank account at Wells Fargo or at Chase or US Bank, whatever, they're fine. Personally, I have a credit union account and a bank account. I like to use both. What's important is that you use these places. They do more than accounts. They can give you free or low-cost advice. You can check your credit score for them, which is something that will mean something to you someday. You can get scholarships through banks and credit unions. Much more. They're actually there to help you make good financial decisions. It's important to understand what they can do for you. Anybody ever heard of the FDIC before? Sometimes you'll see a commercial for Capital One or something, and they'll say, FDIC, member, FDIC. That means Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. Credit unions are insured by the National Credit Union Association. That means your money is insured up to $250,000. So even if a bank that you belong to gets robbed, the federal government will give you your money back. So banks and credit unions that are insured by these organizations are safe. If and when you switch or you choose a new bank or credit union, make sure that they are insured by these organizations. Then they are safe places to keep your money. There's a lot of choices. You guys live here in Lakeville, there's tons of banks and credit unions in Lakeville. It's kind of overwhelming. If you drive on Cedar going north, there's like 30 banks on that road. It is crazy. All of them want your money. Remember, these places are businesses. They make money by lending, right? Choose what's right for you. When you go to college, let's say you choose a small town to go to college, there might be one bank you get to choose from, right? It's not hard to switch banks, but just make sure you choose one that meets your needs accordingly. Boom, number 8. Beware of impulse buying. How many of you have ever bought something on an impulse? It's okay to admit it. Put your hands down. Have you ever regretted it afterwards? I sure have. Last year, I ordered a GoPro on Amazon. I had one-click ordering on Amazon. Click! It was there within 24 hours. I have yet to use that thing because I watched a YouTube video of a guy with it and I was like, oh my gosh, that's cool. I bought it. $75. Haven't used it yet. Maybe it's my fault, for sure. On Amazon, one-click ordering is so easy. I often give the people the advice that if you're tempted by that, disable one-click ordering. So you can think twice over whether that thing is a want and a need before you buy it. Retailers set up their stores to maximize their profits. How many of you knew that? More power to you if you did. If you don't, listen to this. When you go to check out at Cub or Aldi or Costco, wherever you're shopping, there's always like lots of candy and stuff by the checkout. You all notice that? Why do you think that stuff is there? Because it's really easy to grab that Snickers bar and throw it on that conveyor belt because you might think you need it, right? Did you know that retailers, especially grocery stores, will put milk in the very back of the store just so you have to walk all the way to the back to get it and be exposed to all the merchandise on the way? It's important to be aware of that. Their profits come from you. They're trying to make a living. That's their business model. That's okay. You do need to buy things, but when you walk into a store, impulse buys really kick in. Be aware that this is what they want you to do. In order to counteract that, make a list of what you need. When you're shopping with yourself or your parents or whoever, walk around, follow the list, buy what you need, go to the checkout. Remember, I said it's okay to have wants as long as they're within your budget. Avoid browsing if you can. Some people really like to shop. That's fine. It's great. Understand you don't need everything that you're looking for. And think twice. Decide if you really need it. Number 7. This one is important because as you get older, maybe some of you will decide to start families. Some of you will buy a house. You might buy a house in a suburb like Lakeville. You're going to have neighbors. You are going to meet lots of people that are in the same vein of life that you are, and they are all going to be different levels of successful than you are. Be careful with this. There's always going to be people out there that have more money than you. And instinctively, you might want to compare yourself to them. You might want to compare your own self-worth to them. There's a saying, an old saying called keeping up with the Joneses. Anybody ever heard of it? The Joneses being your neighbors. You got to keep up with the Joneses. The Joneses just put a new fence in. We got to put a new fence in too. The Joneses just got a pool. We got to get a pool too. This is a dangerous mindset. Maybe the Joneses make more money than you. Maybe they don't. Maybe they're taking on debt to do those things. You don't know, right? Your self-worth is not determined by how much money you make. Be careful in comparing yourself to others. Apples and oranges, right? One of you said budgeting earlier. How many of you have a budget right now? Most of you living at home, probably all of you living at home. Your parents still provide for most of your needs and maybe some of your wants. Maybe some of you have a job right now. It's never too early to make a budget. And I will admit to you, I didn't start seriously budgeting until I was in my late 20s. And when I actually took the time to do it, I was very surprised where my money was going. For instance, I used to buy a coffee almost every day. I couldn't believe how much I was spending on coffee nearly every day. What did I do? I invested in a coffee machine, a good one. And I've saved a lot of money by doing that. Looking at how much you're spending and how much you're making is very important. My budgeting used to be up here, now it's on paper. It was game-changing when I did that. There's a lot of apps out there to help you. There's one called Mint that's very popular. You Need a Budget is popular. Just Google budgeting apps someday. They will help you achieve this. It's a good idea. Sometimes we say budgets are spending plans, and really, there's not one way to do it. Write your income, write your expenses. Don't have to reinvent the wheel when it comes to budgeting. Whatever works for you is good. Just understand where your money's coming from and where it's going. A spending plan and a savings plan. When you have it, you avoid going to debt. I'm going to talk about debt in a minute here. How many of you know what credit is? When most of us think of credit, we think of credit what? Credit cards. The word credit actually just means borrowed money. Most people think of it as credit cards. Did you know that credit is the #1 way people spend money in the United States? Now, I am actually a believer in credit. I think it is very powerful if you use it responsibly. Some amount of debt is normal. Those of you who are looking to go to college, some of you are going to get student loans. Someday you're going to buy a house maybe, and you'll get a mortgage. Some debt is what we call good debt, which means when you take on that debt, it has a positive return on your investment. Going to college means someday you'll get a better job and make more money. That was money well spent. When you buy a house, you hope that your house increases in value and you have fixed payments on the loan and you have a place to live. That's money well spent. Not all debt is good debt. Some of it is, some of it's not. Credit card debt is one of the bad debts out there. Credit is very powerful if you use it responsibly. When I talk about credit cards, I always recommend people, yeah, you should get one because it helps improve your credit score, A. B, a lot of these credit cards have reward programs that give you cash back, so you get free money. Isn't that cool? But you gotta make sure you pay off your balance. Credit cards have limits to them. If you get a credit card and the limit is $10,000, you might think, oh my gosh, I have $10,000. Oh my gosh, I'm going to go on a spending spree. But you don't get to keep that $10,000. You got to pay it back. And if you're not able to, they will charge you interest. And that interest will grow over time, and you'll owe even more. A lot of Americans are in this situation with credit cards. Again, great, powerful tools to use when you get the chance to someday. Just be careful with credit. Taxes. How many of you have ever sat down with your parents during tax season and see what they did? Anybody? Good for you. That's awesome. Taxes are complicated. I know lots of really smart adults that have no idea how to do their taxes, and they take it to a tax person every year and they pay them to do it. That's fine. There's also tax software out there like TurboTax and H&R Block where you can do it yourself and they make it pretty easy. It's actually never been easier to do taxes. The US tax code is complicated. What I want you to understand is that you will have to pay taxes. How many of you have a job in here? Good for you all. If you don't, that's okay. Someday you will. When you got your first paycheck and you looked at it, did any of you go, where's all my money going? I was supposed to make $800. Why do I bring home $700 or $600? What's the reason for that? Because of taxes and other things, right? They're a fact of life. We're going to have to pay them. In fact, Benjamin Franklin, founding father, one of his most famous quotes, the only two things certain in life are death and taxes. You got to pay them. What's important to remember is that they fund roads, they fund schools, they fund things we use all the time, government services. You all have a voice in how your taxes can be spent. Some of you might run for office someday. You'll all get a chance to vote someday. You have a voice in how your taxes are spent. You cannot avoid paying them. There is a thing called tax efficiency. You can learn different ways to lower your tax burden. That's more than what we're going to get into today. But understand that you will have to pay these during your life. Who's heard of compound interest? Some of you might have learned this in math class. If you haven't, listen carefully, because this is one of the most powerful things that I teach to young people, and it's one of the most advantageous things that you will be positioned to take advantage of. Compound interest is when you are investing your money and it grows over time at a given interest rate. The idea is when you have an interest rate of, say, 4%, if you're given 4% on your account and you took that 4% out, your money wouldn't grow. But if you invested the 4% into your original balance, and then every year you kept investing that 4% or whatever it was, it would grow exponentially, as you see by this chart here. Albert Einstein, one of the greatest thinkers ever to live, said that compound interest is the 8th wonder of the world. Your money grows incredibly quickly when you reinvest the things that you earned. Snowball effect, sometimes it's called. His saying said, it's the 8th wonder of the world. He who understands it earns it, he who doesn't pays it. Meaning that if you take on credit card debt and you're being charged interest, you're paying compound interest on your own debt. But if you invest your money, reinvest those dividends and interest that you earn every year, your own money is growing it. And you'd be surprised how quickly it grows. There's a famous rule that's rather simple. It's called the rule of 72. That's when you take the interest rate of whatever it is you're earning in the account, you divide it by 72, and you'll see how long it takes to double your money. So if your interest rate was 4%, 72 divided by 4 is 18 years. Real simple calculation. But 18 years, that's only part of your working life. To have your money double that quickly is pretty awesome. Financial know-how will protect you from fraud. The more you know, the better you are protected. Unfortunately, there are a lot of people that are going to try to swindle you throughout your lives. Whether it's a salesperson trying to sell you a car that you don't need, or it's somebody who's sending you a phishing email trying to get access to your bank account. The more you read, the more you build your financial knowledge, the more protected you'll be against these. Because the criminals aren't getting any stupider. They find new ways to try to separate us from our money in nefarious ways, right? The scams are always changing. Since I started working in the financial sector, I've seen a lot more of these attempts because they usually target places like banks. But even in your personal emails, you might get emails that look weird, or they might be from someone you think you know. There might be some misspellings, and there'll be a link in there. And if you click it, it could do damage to you. They're called phishing attacks. How many of you have heard of those before? Very common. I would encourage you to read up on some of these. Because like I said, they're not getting any stupider. Scammers are out there. Number 1, start saving now. This is my number 1 because I can't emphasize this enough. When it comes to saving, there's a lot of ways to do it, but what I always tell people is take pleasure in it. Just like you would take pleasure in buying that new video game from Steam, or buying that mocha latte that you love, or buying that new pair of yoga pants, when you take pleasure in those things, take pleasure in paying yourself. Because when you save, you pay yourself. And you have that money when you need it someday. Financial institutions, banks, and credit unions can be good tools for this. You can automate that. You can tell them to take 10% of your paycheck and put it in a savings account right away, and they will do that. That way you don't have to think about it. Because when you have to think about it, that's when you might make a mistake. Automate this process as much as possible. But not every choice you make will be optimal. That's okay. Finance is complicated, and it's different for everyone. That's why they call it personal finance, right? It's okay to make mistakes, like I said earlier. But save. Cannot emphasize that enough. You will need that money someday. It will be coming in handy for you. It's possible to save too much. Most people don't. Most people save too little. If you look at the figures with how many young people are ready for retirement, or how many older people than me are ready for retirement, it's pretty sobering. There's a lot of people that don't even have $100,000 in their retirement accounts, which will not be enough for them to retire someday because they didn't have the habit of saving. Build this habit, you will be in a good place someday. All right. Any questions? We're just right about the end of the hour. Any questions, anything on your mind that you can ask while I'm here? Is this intimidating to any of you guys? If it is, that's okay. I remember being scared to death of finance. It was something that I really embraced a little bit later in my adult life, and I'm glad I did. If some of this stuff went over your head, whoo, this is really tough right now. It's okay. It's okay to relax about it. It's okay to make mistakes. Yes?
Did you start saving after you realized that you were starting to get commercial on the GoPro?
Absolutely. Well, I've always been a saver, but that was an example of me saying, oh my gosh, I think I want this thing. I knew I had money for it, but after I bought it, I realized I didn't need it. That's why I like to tell that story.
So is that what motivated you to give these speeches? Or?
Not exactly. I've always, well, not always, but at least the last 15 years or so, I've really enjoyed personal finance. Just like anything, once you learn it and you become confident, it gets a little easier. Finance is one of those things. But again, unlike the quadratic formula or other things that you learn in school, this is stuff you will be using in your adult life. Nothing against math class, but you will use finance. Part of your wellness, right? Anything else for me? Anybody still sleeping? That's what I thought.
All right, so the bell is about to ring for advisory. Let's give a round of applause for Jerry.
Thank you for being a good audience. Good luck to all of you.